Hey guys, today I want to talk about what is Git and why it's useful. Let's suppose there is a software engineer who is working as a front-end developer and is working on some features of a front end like a buy now button. And all of a sudden the customer comes back and asks the developer to change the requirements. Since they're not using a version control system, the developer will become really frustrated. Now he has to go back, change his code, and what if the customer comes back tomorrow and asks him to change another feature? That is the reason why it's best to use a version control system while developing code. If the developer is working on a certain feature and commits the code, that version of the code is saved with a unique commit ID, and the developer can always go to that particular version very easily, even if the customer changes the requirement every week. The developer will not become frustrated, and they will have different versions of code available to work on. Now, Git is a distributed version control system with a central repository for tracking changes in source code during software development. It is designed for coordinating work among programmers. It can be used to track changes in any set of files. What is a local repository? The local version control system is present on the local desktop of the developer. Developers make changes in their private workplace, and after commit, Git provides a local or a private copy of the whole repository. Users can perform many operations with this repository, such as add file, remove file, rename file, move file, commit changes, and many more. Suppose that this is a desktop of the developer which has Git installed on it, and the developer is working on the HTML file. There are 3 different workplaces on this desktop. The working directory is where the developer is actually developing the code. The HTML file has to move through the staging area in order to be committed and move to the local repository. Then it moves from the local repository to the remote or central repository, or Git, so that different developers can access the code you are working on. What is a working directory and staging area? Whenever a developer commits the code, Git looks for the files present in the staging area. Only the files present in the staging area are considered for commit, and not all of the modified files. Let us see the basic workflow of Git. First, you modify a file and add these files from the working directory. Second, you add these files to the staging area. Third, you perform commit operation that moves the files from the staging area. After the push operation, it stores the changes permanently to the Git repository. If suppose you want to add the web.html file from working directory to staging area, it would be git add web.html. The git command used to add the web.html from staging to the local repository is git commit web.html. Now let's talk about the life cycle of Git. You clone the Git repository as a working copy, then you modify the working copy by adding or editing files. If necessary, you also update the working copy by taking other developers' changes. Next, you review the changes before you commit. Then you commit changes. If everything is fine, you push the changes to the repository. After committing, if you realize something is wrong, then you can correct the last commit and push the changes to the repository. What is Git branching? Git lets you branch out from the original codebase. This lets you more easily work with other developers and gives you a lot of flexibility in your workflow. Here's an example of how Git branches are useful. Let's say you need to work on a new feature for a website. You create a new branch and start working. You haven't finished your new feature, but you get a request to make a rush change and need to go needs to go live on the site today. You switch back to the master branch, make the change, and push it live. Then you can switch back to your new feature branch and finish your work. When you're done, you merge the new feature branch into the master branch, and both the new feature and the rest change are kept. When you merge two branches or merge a local and remote branch, you can sometimes get a conflict. For example, you and another developer unknowingly both work on the same part of a file. The other developer pushes their changes to the remote repo. When you then pull them to your local repository, you'll get a merge conflict. Luckily, Git has a way to handle conflicts so you can see both sets of changes and decide which one you want to keep. Some Git commands are: to install Git on a server, you would do yum install Git. Another is to initialize Git repository, you would do git init. And to check the current status of a Git repository and to see which changes have been staged and which haven't, and which files are being tracked by Git, you would do git status. To commit a file with the description of first commit, you would do git commit /m first commit. To add a new remote repository, use the git remote add command on the CLI in the directory your repository is stored at. The git remote add command takes two arguments: a remote name, for example, origin, for easy access so you don't have to type the URL every time you import the repository. A remote URL, for example, would be https://github.com/user1/myrepo.git. For example, git remote add origin https://github.com/user1/myrepo.git. Then set a new remote. Another command would be git push command, which updates the remote repository with local commits. You would use git push origin master. To pull the code from remote to local repository, you would use git pull. To clone a Git repository, use the git clone command with the URL of your Git repository. You would do git clone https://github.com/username/project.git, cloning into project. Git fetch command really only downloads new data from a remote repository, but it does not integrate any of this new data into your working files. You would use git fetch for this. Lastly, git pull command directly integrates it into your current working copy files, and the command for this is git pull.